All of us have heard of trauma. All of us have experienced in some way trauma. I've had the unfortunate experience of having a grandson who was shot when he was 15 years old, murdered, home invasion. The two people who did it are both serving time, 36 years in the penitentiary, 6 years for home invasion, 30 years for the murder. And during the process of that, I mentioned that I had empathy for the individuals who did it. My son and I were in the car one day, and he said, "Daddy, can I ask you a question, just man to man?" I said, "Yeah, you can ask me anything." He said, "Did you really mean it when you said that you had empathy for the two kids who killed my son?" I said, "Yes, Stacy, I really meant it." I said, because having any kind of negative feeling relative to them will not bring your son back. And while I miss him and miss all of the things that we may have done, I also feel sorry for the two individuals who ruined their lives and the lives of their family members. And he said, "Well, the only thing I can say is you're a better man than I am." But at any rate, Reverend Chris Harris has taken on this challenge of dealing with trauma. Senator Durbin and I have a bill that we introduced and reintroduced, trauma-informed care. And when we introduced the bill, I think we had 100 and something different organizations there at the press conference with us. We still are trying to generate the resources and the interest and the money and the research and all that it takes to deal with this issue of trauma, where both those who've been traumatized as well as those who may have caused a good piece of the trauma. Reverend Dr. Harris, Bright Star Community Outreach, Bright Star Community Church, will you address us?
I want to say good afternoon, everybody. Let me say it again. Y'all know I'm a black preacher from the Pentecostal church. You got to talk back to me. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so very much. Let me just first of all ask all of you all to do me a favor. It is wonderful when you have our civic leaders and our political leaders that really do care about us enough to get involved and serve us and lead us in instrumental ways. Would you just do me a favor? We are blessed to have one of the greatest congressmen all over the world. Please go crazy for Congressman Davis. And for all of my other colleagues that are here to speak today and those that are leading this work, and particularly a group of individuals who I believe are often forgotten about. And not only do they have to deal with our trauma, but they also have to experience and endure their own trauma on a constant basis. And that is the Chicago Police Department. And I also want to say to Director Brooks today, on behalf of all police officers, will you all clap your hands for all of our law enforcement and leaders who do this great work. And the reason I point that out is because we partner. So I get to pastor two churches on the south side of Chicago, Bright Star Church of God in Christ in Bronzeville, and then St. James Church of God in Christ in the West Pullman area. I'm the founder and CEO of Bright Star Community Outreach, a separate 501c3 that has been around for the last 14 years. And I want to acknowledge one of my colleagues who helped us to do this work in the community, and it birthed around what was needed in our local area. Miss Nicole Wheatley, who is in the back, would you please raise your hand, who has been doing all this community work with me, along with Charles Bullock, who is there at the door. Let me just do this really quick. All of you all that are tired of looking at the news media on Monday, knowing how many people have died or gotten shot, raise your hand. All right, hands down. Those of you all who know someone who has been murdered, raise your hand. Those of you all who know someone who has been shot, raise your hand. And those of you all, last but not least, who live in constant fear that it's going to happen to you, your family, or on your block, raise your hand. And here's what I say to people. Say nothing until you do something about violence and trauma. And as a pastor, I couldn't continue to focus on getting people saved and ignore the necessity to keep them safe. And one of my challenges with the church and with pastors and all faith institutions is we don't do enough. I believe more can be done. And so, as the founder and CEO of Bright Star Community Outreach, and all of you all that have your phone with you today, you can go to our website on your phone, Bright Star Community Outreach, even while I'm talking, brightstarcommunityoutreach.com. And I hope the phone that you're using is an Apple product, because the rest I'm praying for y'all. I'm just teasing a little bit. Let me tell you, there was, as clearly somebody with a Samsung, I'm just clowning. Let me just say this, you know, since January of 2012, more than 7,438 people have been murdered in Chicago alone. Let me say it again. Since January of 2012, more than 7,000 plus people have been murdered in Chicago alone. And that doesn't even include those who have been shot or wounded. And at Bright Star Community Outreach, we asked the question, who did or does the trauma counseling for those families? Whether it be the victim's family or the perpetrator's family. In most cases, nobody. Because as you all know, black and brown people don't really go to counseling, not exclusively, but specifically, since that's the population that I get the privilege to serve. They don't really go to counseling for 4 reasons. They don't know the counselor. They don't trust the counselor. They don't think they can afford the counseling. And then number 4, the stigma. Nobody wants to be labeled crazy. But they still come and talk to people like me, the faith leader. So I took a trip to Israel and saw a place called Townhall Trauma Counseling Center, where those who say that they live under the constant threat of violence and trauma, they suffer from PTSD. And many, many times when I would go to Washington, I would get the privilege to talk to the congressman and didn't even realize I was talking to someone who is a professional and an expert in mental health. And I shared with him that I saw this place called Natal because while they're worried about missiles and sirens over there, in that region, we're counting body bags and toe tags every day in our community. And so the Lord said to me, while I was in Israel, I want you to bring back to Bronzeville what you saw here in Israel. Again, 7,000 plus people have been murdered. And we asked who did or does the trauma counseling for those families. Again, nobody. And so he said, I want you to identify, train, and certify faith and community leaders to provide trauma counseling based on an Israeli model, and we've been able to do that. And now, since we started that work 8 years ago, 50,000 residents in our community have received trauma counseling services. And that certainly deserves a hand, not for me, but for the practitioners who are doing that actual work. Now let me say this. I think it's important that we don't do things to the community or do things for the community. It's important that we do things with the community. So we decided to do a survey, and we surveyed 19 schools in the greater Bronzeville area. I'm a son of the soil of Bronzeville. Please don't get fooled by the little suit jacket. I was raised up right next door, 2930 South Dearborn, apartment 503, because you ain't from the projects if you don't say the apartment number. Next to the incinerator that I used to set on fire. Mama, would you please raise your hand? Mama Wallace, raise your hand. She knows exactly who's standing up here right now. She handles and leads in the Dearborn homes, and I know she's looking at me right now saying, Lord, thank you for saving that boy. And the very place that I used to tear up, now I'm helping to build up. And we talked to those students, and check this out. We surveyed 19 schools in Bronzeville in 2015, and then we surveyed 21 schools in Bronzeville in 2018. And in 2015, 2,500 students were eligible for this 127 question anonymous youth survey. Check this out. We had a 72% response rate the first time and an 82% response rate the second time. And the first time we did it in 2015, literally 30% of those students showed clinical signs of depression. 2018, it was 50%. I want to make sure you all understand that's before George Floyd, before COVID-19. That's before social unrest. That's before the significant decline in police-community relations. And here's the question. If it was 30 in 2015, 50 in 2018, call out the number you think it is right now. We're talking to the young people, it's close to 98. Let me say it again, 98 clinical signs of depression. And so we have opened up a trauma helpline at Bright Star Community Outreach. You can write down the number or see it on our website, 833-TURN-123, where we have faith and community leaders there to answer the phone every single day, this trauma helpline. We have what we call care rooms in the various schools, caring and resilient environment rooms in all of the schools, high school and elementary. And we have touched more than 1,400 students in the care rooms through our schools. We have the Family Advocacy Center at Bright Star Community Outreach through DCFS. And we have touched more than 3,000 families, making sure that those adults are not disconnected from their children. And here's the other thing that I need you to understand. 50,000 people have now been touched through our helpline and care room work. Now, I'll land the plane with this and just tell you, the most exciting thing is we needed a space to do it. We took $1 million and shared it with other community-based organizations, and MacArthur Foundation gave me $1 million, and the Lord told me give most of it away. And we partnered with 15 other community-based organizations to fund their work, to provide the wraparound services in partnership. I'm glad to have experts like Northwestern Medicine, University of Chicago Medicine, the United Way, Cigna, and MacArthur that have given us upwards of $16 million to do this kind of work. But wait a minute, that is just a scraping of the bottom of the barrel. It is hardly enough. And we've been able to do great work, but that's why supporting the bill that our congressman and our senator has pushed forward is so very important. I'll end the plane with this and just tell us, I'm asking everybody, challenge the pastors, challenge the imams, challenge the rabbis, challenge the faith leaders and the faith community, and ask them, what do you do before and after your church service? How do you serve the community? Because at the end of the day, we need to be held accountable to do more. Because you can't get them saved if you don't first keep them safe. You can't get them saved if you don't first keep them safe. So I'll ask you, please let people know what we're doing. On Juneteenth, we cut the ribbon of the Turn Center. The Turn Center is the Urban Resilience Network. The school that I used to go to, Carter G. Woodson School, right across the street from my church on 45th and Evans. On Monday, we cut the ribbon and we took over 68,000 square feet of an empty building that we just repurposed, a school right here in Bronzeville, to put the helpline there and focus on workforce development, the wraparound services, and the trauma counseling work. Listen, that's the school that I used to write my name on the desk. And now I took over that whole building, and now we're serving our community in the same way that our community has served us. So listen, I'm not only the Hair Club for Men president, Congressman, I'm also a client for mental health services. Because as a pastor, I went through a divorce 15 years ago, and I wanted to commit suicide. As a pastor, I became an absolute alcoholic. And I couldn't go anywhere because I was a public figure. And I was hurting while I was healing other people. And were it not for some folks who looked beyond my faults and saw what I needed, I wouldn't be here today. So as Marciano passed those out, you can give it to other people. Just do me a favor, act like it's weed and just let them get it and pass it. Just pass the Dutchie on the left-hand side. I want you to understand, don't ever get too big to seek the help that you really need. And remember, everybody say, it is okay to not be okay. But it's not okay to stay at a place where you're not okay. Clap your hands and say, help is available.
Thank you, thank you, thank you so much. As a matter of fact, I thought of my daddy who used to say, I'd rather see a sermon than hear one any day. And I think we see a sermon when we see what Bright Star has done and continues to do. So thank you, Reverend Harris.